Welcome to Growth Mindset. The idea of the show is to widen our horizons, learn and grow through meaningful conversations. As our first guest on the show, we have Jay Tao, the co founder of Brother Nature, an organization working towards men's mental health and well being. He's a fabulous presenter and actually one of the coolest people I've ever met. Tao is a Muay Thai kickboxing trainer, has coached over 120 fighters and created 18 champions. What a wonderful combination of professions, and that's why I'm so excited to speak to him about the topic of masculinity. So please join me in welcoming Tao. Welcome, Tao. Welcome to Growth Mindset, and thank you so much for doing this. How do you feel about being here today?
I'm very excited. Thank you very much for having me. I'm really excited to have this talk on positive masculinity with you and how we can kind of start dialogue, on this kind of these subjects rather than, dish out exact like what we think we know or like this is the way it should be. I think how we develop that growth mindset is that we have like rich conversations and dialogue about, and listen to many perspectives on this, and then we can sort of draw our own conclusions and, have a really sort of good critical reflection of subjects and have a broad sort of input of information, and then we can draw our own conclusions about it. So I'm very excited to be here with you. Thank you so much.
That's so good to know. So, I actually want to begin by telling you why this subject of masculinity fascinated me so much. Last year, when you came to RMIT to speak to us about healthy masculinity and positive masculinity, I realized, and I remember going outside the session hall, calling my mother and telling her this, that I imbibe masculinity traits or masculine traits to be able to move to a position of power, because I saw my father as the most powerful figure in our family, and I believed that to be able to get to the top, I needed to adopt some of his traits. And interestingly, those included disregarding emotions, putting up a strong front come what may, and being self sufficient. I refused to accept or ask for help in any situation. So, to help people like me realize some of the traits they possess that could have detrimental future outcomes, can you break down masculinity for us and tell us why is it such a topic discussed so much today?
There's a lot in that there, but it's really important for us to understand that, yeah, absolutely right. Masculinity is not something that's just embodied by men and males and male identifying people. Masculine traits can be adopted at various times by all people, and in a very capitalist sort of patriarchal society, those character traits are rewarded. So success rides on the back of these things. We do have a sort of, sadly, top-down, dominating, sort of powering over structures within our society where people are trying to climb a ladder of status, personal status, or success. And so masculine qualities and attributes actually serve them quite well in climbing that ladder, regardless of their gender. So, yeah, it's very interesting to see that when we speak about masculinity and when we speak about these character traits, they're not just the domain of men only. Traditional masculinity is sort of built upon those sort of principles, I guess. Like this kind of being strong and tough is an important characteristic of masculinity. Being self-sufficient, as you just pointed out, is a really important part of that. It's being able to solve one's problems on one's own, resisting the to reach out for help. But I think ultimately, these principles of masculinity are built upon the idea of always being strong and never being weak. So if we're, not showing up as a strong, confident person at all times, then we must be its opposite. So we are weak and we are sensitive and we are worrisome or anxious. And so we are trying to structure an identity that shifts away from being those things and towards being this strong and confident and tough person. Same with our emotional regulation. Seems to be like if we require like help or support or assistance, it means we can't solve our problems on our own. Perhaps we're poor decision makers or poor at regulating our internal climate. We're forced to then reach out for others, and that is a sign of weakness. So these are these kind of ideas about masculinity that we need to challenge in a way, in the sense that because nobody can be all those things all of the time. So on the other hand, we can say, well, those qualities are strong qualities. They are, They're great qualities to have as a part of your identity and personality, but you can't be those things all the time. So it's knowing when do I need to reach out for support? When do I need to be more vulnerable? You know, if I'm looking at always being super strong, tough, and confident, yet I'm in some sort of conflict with somebody I share a close relationship with, and I'm trying to dominate that space or solve the problems in that space according to my own thinking, then perhaps I'm not engaging that space in a very skillful way. I'm not being vulnerable in that situation. I'm not being so I think being tough, being self-sufficient, you know, being assertive and being driven, these qualities can be good. If I'm using aggression to solve my problems, or using aggression to try and control, to try and gain respect, then, you know, I got to start maybe having a better look at these kind of ideas and think, maybe that's not serving me so well now. I think why traditional masculinity has become outdated is because we have shifted into a new world, or a new sort of culture, as sort of culture does progress along. Perhaps those traditional qualities and character traits of masculinity are not serving us that well in this modern time. I would say that on the back of the movement that women have made over the last 50 to 100 years has put the women in the Western world in a very different position. Women have much more agency and autonomy over how they want to conduct their lives, their identity, their pathway through life as far as career is concerned, and their own personal choices. Women's empowerment, I guess, has lifted massively. I don't think masculinity has taken that same journey, but I think that it's taking that now. Now that masculinity finds itself at odds with the world it finds itself in, men are in this position now. So I think, and I think this is a really good thing, men are in a position to be able to take a critical look at how masculinity works for them, how it shows up, and what parts of it do we want to keep, what parts of it do we want to reshape or redefine to fit in this world that we now find ourselves in. So
You very rightly point out that people see it mostly as black and white. If you're not strong, you're considered weak. I was recently having this conversation with a friend and speaking to him about the same topic, and he said, while if I do show my vulnerabilities and if I do express my emotions, more often than not, I'm seen as weak, and people think that they can walk all over me. So I totally agree with that. And but now in this conversation, toxic masculinity is a word that comes up very often. Do you want to define for us what toxic masculinity is? And I'm sure not all masculine traits are negative, so can you show us which ones are worth keeping and worth working on, and which ones cause toxicity in a relation?
I guess it's not a particular trait that produces that toxicity. Generally try not to use the word toxic masculinity because I feel that's very, very shaming. And remembering, I guess, a little bit that the character traits of masculinity that are often dished up for young men to follow is not necessarily their own choice. They didn't necessarily choose these qualities for themselves. Culture sort of puts them onto them. So it's almost this mold of masculinity, and boys fit themselves into it. They fit that mold. We get these messages from like male protagonists in movies. You know, like if we look at superhero movies that young boys are watching, that male protagonist has a very character, and he typically has those very masculine traits and stuff. So we fit that young boy or not, he feels as though he's forced to sort of squeeze himself into this idea of what he should be. But when it refers to masculinity as such, that when we have where there are certain pillars or a certain framework that we're supposed to fit into, and that doesn't fit that person's true identity, personality, or their core values, there can be a discrepancy in there which causes or can cause them to self-regulate in harmful ways. I don't want to go into an Andrew Tate discussion here, but he is a good example of it, is that, like, you know, Andrew Tate, for all of his toxic behaviors as such, misogyny, sexism, very, very, very questionable behaviors, he was someone that we would say is a very strong adherent of masculine norms. Why strong adherent of norms we don't know. We don't know so much about Andrew Tate's history and background. But I might suggest that in this day and age where we are looking at this topic of masculinity and reshaping it or redefining it, there is certainly a large number of men out there who are probably feeling quite disenfranchised or marginalized from the world. They don't know what their role is anymore. That role now, their traditional role, may be starting to seem a little bit obsolete, and that they don't have a new role. It's like, I'm damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't. I don't know what to do. This can cause a lot of frustration in young men. They don't really know exactly how they're tiptoeing on eggshells because they haven't yet adjusted to the world they find themselves in, but they're living via traditional masculine norms that are not really gelling with that. And so they're in a position where they feel like, I don't know what to do. I think Andrew Tate's a good example of that, where he's probably feeling that, being disenfranchised or marginalized, and he's quite angry about it. He's quite angry that he's in a position where he doesn't know what his role is. Beyond all the sort of things that he says and stuff, I find them quite defensive. I find them quite, he is playing a personality that is shock value. So he's using that to gain himself fame. It's gained himself all the way into a Romanian prison, so hasn't really worked out for him well. So I think for people who do, think that Andrew Tate has got some sort of path to follow in life, look where it's led him, So whilst you might be driving around in Bugattis or whatever, it hasn't led him to a good spot. And when I do see Andrew Tate speak, and I do see those kind of 20-second clips more often than not, I'm not actually watching the whole thing, his whole podcast, but I feel like he is quite angry, quite upset. He's acting from a place of being quite hurt, and he's I think that he's using a personality type that shows a wound in him, like that he's a hurt man, and he's responding to the world in quite aggressive, combative ways. So we can't say that traditional masculinity causes violence or all of these things, but it does have the potential to, given intersectional factors in that person's life as well. Certainly there was an American organization called Promundo that did research on masculinity. They've done it in several countries of the world, and Australia happened to be one of them. And men were asked questions about their gender identity and what they thought their gender role was as men, questions around masculinity. It also asked them questions about their mental health and well-being, and sort of assessed where they were at. And it certainly said, from the results that we got from that, young men and men in general felt as though they were getting pressure from society to show up in a certain way. High percentages felt as though they needed to be tough and strong. Nearly 70% of men felt they got the message from society that I need to be tough and strong at all times. Yet only 47% of them personally endorsed that. So it's they got this, they definitely heard the message from society and felt like, yeah, this is what society tells me I should be, but I don't know if I necessarily buy into that. So it shows that men are not necessarily believing in the messages that they get from society about manhood. They feel pressure to show up in that way, but they don't actually personally believe in it. And that in itself creates quite a struggle, an internal discrepancy, because it's like, I have to put this front onto the world because that's how I'm supposed to show up as a man, but I don't necessarily personally endorse this. This is not who I am. Yeah. And so that can be that in itself can be a very difficult space. Or if I feel like if I don't put that face on and put on this armor and show up to the world in this way, I'm going to get attacked. I'm going to get mocked or ridiculed or, humiliated. So
how do you think men can block out the noise of these expectations from society and live by what they believe? Because it's very hard for them. Don't want to be shamed. They want to live up to expectations. So I know you did. So using your story as an example, can you tell us how can others do it as well?
I guess my journey in this space sadly had to happen because of struggles that I faced in my life. Without going into any details, I've faced many struggles in my life at different periods of time, and each one of those struggles has forced me to take a look at myself. So probably at times where my habits have caused me struggles, relationship breakdown or things like that, you've been forced in that sort of wallowing in your own pit. You're forced to look at yourself and go, well, how did I get myself here? I wasn't initially thinking, right, of course, it must be down to my masculinity and how I'm embodying that's leading to all my problems. But eventually it arrived there as to like, what is this personality and identity that I'm trying to create and portray to the world? And how's that going for me? Because I've always probably been one of those people that, has wanted to uphold or give the appearance of upholding masculine norms without really thinking about it in those terms. But, I want to appear strong. I want to appear confident, and I want to appear capable. And I think we find ourselves in sometimes when in areas where we're not those things, we have to fake it till we make it kind of thing. So we just put that out there, even if I'm not feeling that way. On the other hand, I wasn't very good at self-regulating emotionally. I wasn't good at communicating how I was feeling. I didn't really even know how to communicate how I was feeling. So that's a big factor in this as well. If we're taught from a very young age of being emotionally stoic, solving your problems on your own, or in my case probably disavowing or suppressing those emotions, not actually feeling as though I don't even want to go there, I don't want to deal with that because it's all going to come unraveling if I do. We think suppression or disavowing ourselves from our feelings is going to work, but eventually they're just going to come out anyway. So eventually you have to face it. And I think not having skills on how to do that is pulls the rug out from underneath you as well. So I think in redefining masculinity, we're not trying to say, let's throw out this version of masculinity and create a new version of masculinity with these set qualities, because that might not suit the next person. So, just let's open up, like, so you will have heard of masculinity being referred to as the man box, and that there are certain qualities that go in this manhood and there are certain qualities that don't. So the box is a good analogy in this space because it suggests that there is a wall, a divider between qualities that belong and qualities that don't. So rather than say create a new box over here and just put all those other qualities into it, let's destroy the box, so that if those qualities suit you that are in the box, you can keep them, use them in healthy ways. But if other qualities that are outside of the box suit you, you can include them too. There's no parameters or wall that defined these are manly, these are unmanly. Just get rid of that box that makes that division, so that people can just be who they are.
Yeah. Makes sense. And I really want people, and I hope people are able to realize this in time, so that the mental health repercussions in the future are reduced. For example, my father, I think he possessed a lot of these traditional masculinity traits, and he had bottled up emotions for a very long period of time. He was in a war in Congo. He saw dead bodies piled up in front of him. He had a lot of traumatic experiences over his lifetime, and I don't think I ever saw him even flinch. His grief was never shown to us, maybe because we were children, but he never expressed it. And I think those bottled up emotions led to an anxiety outburst. For the past about 6 to 7 months, he's been facing anxiety issues. And that made me realize that men really need to realize this in time to prevent the future repercussions of it. And how do you suggest they notice patterns that are that could have poor future outcomes?
Sure. I guess it's through conversations like this where we can start to talk about that because, as you say, traditionally these things, we don't talk about that. That it is important for men to just show up as tough, and anything that might reveal a chink in the armor is just covered up. So
also,
yes, go.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Is there a process that you use to get from where you were earlier to where you are now in terms of masculinity and the traits that you possess? You said meditation was one.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think meditation is definitely a good way to regulate, and not just regulate. I guess meditation starts with noticing the patterns of your mind.
Okay.
So, you might reveal circular thinking to yourself, or you might okay, well, that thing keeps coming up. What is it there? What's behind that? So it gives you a kind of an opportunity to sort of dig into what feelings or thoughts that you're having, what patterns of feelings and thoughts you're having, where they might be coming from. Is there anything that might be, triggering this on? I mean, I'm not like one to say that we need to follow all of our feelings and the feelings are, fact and truth, because, and as they say, they have these expressions like, follow your heart. What does your heart say? Oh, man, if I went everywhere my heart said, I'd be most of the time in drama. So yeah, I'm not one to say that we need to use our rational, cognitive, logical minds as well as listen to our emotional state and what our hearts are talking about. But it's not one or the other. I think it all needs to come together, and it's processed with everybody having a seat at the table. Sounds like that Inside Out movie, the kids movie, with all the different characters in the head, but it is a little bit like that. And so to be aware of how I'm feeling, I guess once you start to practice that skill, you kind of go, well, I'm feeling angry. It's like, well, okay, are you feeling angry? Are you feeling irritated, frustrated, humiliated, marginalized? Like, what's behind that feeling? Why are you feeling that way? What's that? Are you feeling overlooked? Am I feeling underappreciated? If I speak to a room of men around masculinity, we get onto the topic of emotions, I'm like, name one emotion. They'll be like, anger is the first one to come up. And as we say that, like, there is some narratives around masculinity that say men are not allowed to feel emotions. Like, men feel emotions all the time.
They just don't express it.
Well, they might express it. They just express it through the ones that don't compromise their masculinity, like anger. Anger is an emotion that men are allowed to express, because it doesn't make you less masculine.
True.
Yeah. So if I express sensitivity or worry, or anxiousness, this is not a very manly kind of quality. So if I might be feeling worried or sensitive or vulnerable or anxious, maybe I'm going to express that as anger defensively, because I'm unconsciously scared of showing up as that thing that's happening, and I'm going to show up as aggressive and angry because that might be, well, I mean, it's like I'm painting over an emotion I'm really feeling and expressing it in a certain way. And this, sadly, in itself, in the culture and climate that we live in at the moment, that hasn't undergone this process of change, is like that. I've known men who have expressed vulnerability and expressed chinks in their armor in their relationships, and their partner has fallen out of love with them and like kind of left them. So at their moment where they were at their kind of worst, or at the foundations for this masculine identity was sort of falling apart, their partners left them.
Why? Because they felt that they were not
Yeah.
they did not see them as the same people.
That's right. And I think that so this is really important for us to understand, that it's not just men alone who are upholding masculine ideals. Women uphold masculine ideals as well. Women have ideas about what kind of man they want in their life and what qualities and attributes he should have. So not all women are looking for a very masculine man. The world is much broader nowadays, but many women are. Many women are looking for a man who has, is strong and confident, is successful, in his financial world as well as in his personal world. They are looking for men of stature and status. And if those men reveal that they don't have that, then, women can become less attracted to them. So I've seen relationships fall apart where, is left regretting showing vulnerability. So in that sense, I think that it is very important for men to be able to learn how to be vulnerable and learn how to communicate their struggles, their fears, their worries. And I think that needs to take place with other men. I think that this is just like my random and sort of kind of newer thoughts in this space, but I think men, when they do become open, honest, and a bit raw, realize a lot of them are going through the same thing. I think it reveals the fact that they are going through a similar thing, and then, funnily enough, that's where the empathy comes.
Yeah.
Because men recognize in another, oh man, I experienced that too. And there is, and I've experienced this myself, and I've watched it happen in rooms of men where a bonding forms there, where they're like, I'm with you, brother, I'm around you. Like, I hear you, I see you, I feel you, and it's okay. So in a way, in our own selves, we feel as though, geez, I never want to express that because they're all going to think I'm weak. Yet when it does get expressed in a really sort of authentic and open way, other men in that room don't think, hey, pussy. They don't think that. They think, bro, I know what you're going through. And that forms a bonding. So in this way, I think it's in those spaces where men can explore vulnerability, much as they think that would probably be the last place they want to do that. I think that is the safest space for them to do it. Obviously, the that's not going to be at the football grand final while they're all, drinking and yelling for their football team and all those alpha-like traits are coming out. It's not that environment, but it's in another environment where there is space for that. I think that men do bond together over experiences and conversations like that, and it becomes quite real and quite authentic. And I think that's really that's the space to explore that. I think that while that process of communicating and having dialogue and conversations with other men about their struggles, I think it's probably even a wise thing to keep that part out of their relationship to a greater degree. Not completely. I think it's okay to communicate with your partner as to why, I'm struggling with this, but it's okay. Because I think if you're bringing all of your struggles into your relationship, your partner's now no longer your partner, they're your therapist, And for a lot of men, that's the only place, that's where they feel really secure and comfortable. So they feel like they can bring that to that space, but maybe it's putting a little bit too much on that relationship. Maybe it's, your partner, your lover can't necessarily be your therapist and your mum and all of those things in one, right? So maybe it's better to not put all those things upon her. And even just like, maybe that sounds like, entering into a very therapeutic kind of relationship and dialogue. But I'm saying, like, just when your stuff's spilling out, don't spill it out onto your partner.
So you're suggesting that open up first in the boys' circle?
I think that's the way to go.
Okay.
Yeah. And that then requires that men form friendships and bonds that go beyond this superficial banter. I think a lot of male to male friendships is like, no one's ever really touching on any of the real stuff. So it's a kind of very surface level conversations about weather and football and, women and that kind of thing. And no one's ever really sort of deep diving into real stuff, stuff that's going on for them, what their values are, what's going on for them in their life and how they're really coping with it, rather than like, oh yeah, nah, sweet bro, yeah, nah, it's good, it's all good, mate.
So basically one of them needs to build the courage to open up to help everyone else open up.
Sure.
So.
And I think having conversations like this where, I can sit down, I'm quite comfortable to talk about this sort of stuff. I'm not going to go into the details of my personal life, but I'm happy to talk about, I face struggles. So on one hand, I'm able to uphold these kind of real masculine traits and qualities, yet at the same time, I do really struggle at times, and I do need my friends and support network. And I have, managed my life quite poorly at times in my life where I kind of go, had I only learned these skills earlier than this, I probably would have avoided a lot of pitfalls that I've had and a lot of destructive kind of behaviors and patterns and attitudes that have caused hurt to people that I've loved, and if I'd had a bit more, I don't know, intelligence to just sort of deal with things a little bit rather than try and sweep it under the rug, I probably could have avoided some of those things. So, I know that men who maybe even listening to this are undergone the same thing, they've felt the same way. And I think that, whilst I don't think you want to don't go hang out all your dirty washing out there on the line for everybody to see, of course, we've all done things that are like, unskillful in our lives. We've all had times where we've regretted the way we've behaved in a certain situation. It's fine, we're human, we're not perfect. We don't need to try and be perfect. But, when we do stumble, it's worth having a look at as to why we stumbled and what can we do about it? What can we do to improve?
So, can you also tell us a little about Brother Nature and what are you doing in that
so
space?
this is an exciting new venture that I'm doing with a colleague of mine who has many, many years in this space of masculinities. And he actually used to be my manager at the Men's Project. I worked for his company beforehand, Naroda, which he shut down, and became the general manager of the Men's Project and said, come across to the Men's Project, work with us there. We did a lot of work there, and then he went on to the Department of Education, and I've just wrapped things up at the Men's Project now, and we've come back together, or we've been together working on this little hustle for quite a while called Brother Nature. And it is similar to the work that these men's organizations are doing, similar like Tomorrow Man or the Man Cave or the Men's Project, who do a lot of work with men and boys in the community around masculinity and around emotional intelligence, gender roles and that sort of thing. It'll be in that space as well, but we are building the ethos for Brother Nature around men's well-being, men's mental health and well-being, and their identity and masculinity. So some organizations have an agenda in this space due to the funding that they get from different areas, but they're very much in the space of men's violence against women, and they're looking at the characteristics of masculinity that result in these kind of things. So, and our work will work in that space as well, in gender equality, in family violence, and in men's violence against women, because that's a part of masculinity that has a very devastating impact on the world around it, particularly in women's lives. So we will work in this space, but we will also work on men's well-being, because we know, statistics released in Australia this year said that the leading cause for death for Australian men 15 to 54 is suicide. More than heart disease, more than cancer, more than road accidents.
Oh my God.
Suicide is the number one cause of death for young men in Australia, 15 to 54. So that's a big demographic. Yeah, this is alarming. So we know that strong adherents of masculine norms, those who strongly identify with masculinity and rigid gender roles, are at a higher risk of suicide than those who don't. Those who are a bit more free about their personalities and identities have much less, but still too high, suicidal ideation, problems with depression and mental health and well-being. So that's a big area of concern for us. And my colleague in Brother Nature, the co-founder with me, he comes from that background of struggling mentally, where he suffered from depression quite badly, and that took him on his journey through this reshaping his masculinity. So Brother Nature is looking at all of it, the whole package of what kind of qualities and attributes are making up masculinity, and what outcomes is that having, and how can we address them more broadly. So not just in one space of, say, family violence, or not just in one space of suicides and mental health, but in all of it, and looking at the whole, looking at the many outcomes that unhealthy masculinity or unregulated identity, and that's not the right word to use, but where we can have a sort of a critical look at our lives, and how we might support men in doing better for themselves, and constructing and building lives that are more in sync with where they want to be and where they want to go.
So how can suppose our viewers participate in activities conducted by Brother Nature, or reach out to you?
I guess, it's so new at this stage. We're still actually currently trying to build our website, so it's literally just kicking off. So we hope to run workshops, retreats, and that sort of thing. We'll have men kind of around fire pits talking about things, doing hikes, and sort of just kind of unraveling these ideas about masculinity and their well-being, slowly.
This is interesting.
Yeah.
I think we've answered most questions, but in case viewers have further questions, can they reach out to you? Or you can send me a LinkedIn message, and I'll ask you, and we can maybe create another video, or maybe some shorts about it.
Would definitely love to. I think create some shorts or something, chuck it on TikTok if there's if it gets a good response and people enjoy the message, maybe you can take snippets out of it, put it on social media, that sort of thing would be great. I think and if we want to, if there is any of the viewers that you want sort of ask questions, or maybe we can even do a follow-up podcast on here, we could most happily come back and continue the conversation. That's my it's my passion in life, is this conversation, as you may have seen. So happy to talk about it. I could talk about this underwater right now. So yeah.
You've got practice. All right. Thank you so much for being on the show, and you're our first guest. I hope people like it.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, everybody. Yeah, feel free to ask me any follow-up questions.